You don't need confidence to start. What you need is courage.
Simon is a personal development entrepreneur, coach, and public speaker.
Because imperfect action that is executed is always better than perfect action never taken.
Of all the things that you could have written a book about, why write a book about energy?
Without energy, you can't do much. If you were energy rich but time poor, you could still get more done in the hours and days than most would get done in weeks or months.
How do we turn our goals into vision?
That a goal is measurable. A goal could be to finish a marathon. A vision is measured more by emotion and its ability to bring people into your story.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Unmatched. This is the first episode of 2024 and of season 3, and I am extremely excited to have one of my favorite authors, Simon Alexander Ong. Simon, welcome to Unmatched.
Oana, thank you so much for having me on.
Simon is a personal development entrepreneur, coach, and public speaker, and he is also the author of one of my favorite books, ENERGIZE, which in preparation for this conversation, I've reread for the second time this week just to kind of remember all the amazing things that I read about in the first place. So I am so honored to have you here today with us, Simon. So the first question that I wanted to ask you, and the thing that has been on my mind since I got this book in my hands, is why write a book about energy? Of all the things that you could have written a book about, why was energy such an important topic for you?
Energy was an important topic for me because when I look at my journey from being in the corporate world to what I now get to do today, coaching, speaking, writing, and consulting and advising companies, what I saw was that energy was a primary driver of motivation, and that without energy, you can't do much. So if I share it in this way, just to help the listeners understand what I mean by energy being a driver of your motivation, if you are time rich but energy poor, what is going to happen is that even if you have a lot of time, you are going to procrastinate, you're going to waste that time, and you're not really going to take advantage of the time that you do have. But if you flip the scenario the other way, if you were energy rich but time poor, you could still get more done in the hours and days than most would get done in weeks or months. And what that taught me was that I had to work on my own energy in order to have the motivation to achieve all the things I wanted to do in my life. And so that's why I really wanted to talk about energy from that perspective. But also, I was reflecting in the build-up of putting my book proposal together to share with the publisher about moments when I would come down from speaking at stages at companies and conferences where people would come up to me and they wouldn't have a question, but they would just say, Simon, I just wanted to share how much I loved your energy. You know, if I could have just a small percentage of the energy you have, I could go on and achieve so much more in my life and career. So that's really the genesis of how this idea of energy being everything started.
And I think this is probably the idea that got me hooked on your book in the first place, because just to kind of give you the fun fact of it, I work a full-time job. I'm a mom of 2 small kids, and I have a passion for what I'm doing on Unmatched, and that only can happen after 9 p.m. And that's the reason why when you say energy is the main fuel behind everything that you do, that's where I connect with this idea so much, because honestly nobody has energy to do anything at 9 p.m. or after 9 p.m. every single day and every single week unless there is something behind it. So this is kind of what I would love to unpack, especially as we begin a new year and people are starting to make plans and they're thinking about their next 12 months ahead of them. I'm excited to dive deep into that with you. So before we go into that, I would love to hear your story about why you decided to become a coach in the first place.
So When I was a teenager at secondary school, I guess high school, uh, to those outside of the UK, I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my life after I went to college, and all that I knew were the traditional paths. So banking, law, medicine, accounting, consulting, engineering, because that's what was instilled into me from not only my family, but also the careers advisor that we had at school. And because I'd watched films such as Boiler Room or at Wall Street and the like, it made me want to pursue a career in banking. But it was probably the worst time to do so because I graduated from the London School of Economics here in London in the middle of 2007, and I went straight into working in the financial services sector at a company called Lehman Brothers, which collapsed 14 months after I joined. So it was a very volatile start to my career, and I quickly realized that even though I looked successful on the outside, it didn't matter if I didn't feel fulfilled on the inside. So if I felt unhappy on the inside, even though people would look at me and say, Simon, you're in a very good career, it's paying well. A lot of people would love to be where you are in terms of the job you have. It didn't matter if I just wasn't happy inside. And so in hindsight, looking back, the crisis was almost a blessing in disguise because it really put me in the position of having to step back and ask myself if I was doing this career for myself or I was doing it to please other people. And I came across this article that talked about Bronnie Ware's book, The Top Regrets of the Dying, and the number one regret she found in the interview she had with her patients was, I wish I lived a life more true to myself than a life for others. And so what happened is that when I positioned my financial career into a job that was not as intense, but gave me the time after working on weekends to explore the world beyond this bubble that I was living in. I went out and read different books. I went to workshops. I went to seminars. I went to conferences. I surrounded myself with people who were doing things that I wanted to do. And very quickly, I learned that one of the fastest ways to make progress in any area of our life is to design an environment that makes success inevitable. And what happened is I saw that because as my environment changed, my mindset changed. And I got into this period of just experimenting with things. As I had an idea, I wanted to give it a try. I would just test it with no attachment to the outcome. If it worked, great, then I'm now making progress. I'm building momentum. But if it didn't work, I've got a lesson that I would not have had otherwise. And this journey led me into the world of coaching because I got to this point where I said, I really want to do something for myself, but I don't know what that could be. And I kept getting this feedback from people that, Simon, you seem to be the one that people go to a lot when they are having a challenge or when they're going for a dilemma or they're thinking about their future. Have you thought about turning that into a career? At that time, I thought it was just being a good friend. You spend time with somebody, you encourage them, you give them support. But I never realized I could monetize that. And so I remember signing up to a 2-day event in London. And it was an event that was teaching attendees not only about the skill of coaching, but how you could use that skill in order to build a business. And it was that weekend that opened my eyes to the world of coaching and how powerful it can be to transform people's lives for the better.
That is amazing. And it sort of sparks another question as a follow up to that, because as you were telling the story, you also mentioned a little bit that the topic about having that moment of crisis that was a blessing in disguise and sort of opened up your mind to a new possibility. Do you feel that you need that moment of crisis in order to see further from where you are right now? And does it have to happen, or can it happen organically over time, even if there's not like a big crisis moment that would put you on a different path, for example?
In an ideal world, I think we we should be making better choices without having to face these difficult challenges. The reality, unfortunately, when I read about success stories or when I speak to people who are achieving great things in their life, is that very often one of the common factors is they've gone through these moments in their life that at the time they did not know if they were going to survive. But they got through it, and it was because of that experience that catapulted them to where they are today. Even when you think about your friends and family, you will often observe that they will say things such as, I need to make better choices. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to call this person. I need to send that email. I need to send my CV off to go for that job in another country. Now, the reality is none of those things actually happen until something personal occurs. So that could be a redundancy, a loss, something that affects you emotionally. And it's very unfortunate that we as humans have to face that before we make the decisions we knew all along that we had to make, but there was no catalyst. So in an ideal world, we shouldn't have to wait until those moments to take action. But the reality is, in many cases, that is what is often required. Even if I look at my history from young to today, what I notice is that it was in those moments, those dark periods of setbacks and challenge, that equipped me with the insight and the wisdom to build the best moments of my life. So just as you put the question to me, I had visualizations in my head of failing university, losing my mum at 17, being made redundant from my first job, burning out in my second job, an experience I share in the very first chapter of the book, losing clients when I first quit the corporate world to start my business, and so on. So all of these visualizations came to my head because at the time it was hard. It was difficult. I didn't know if I would survive or get through this. But when I look back, part of the beauty of hindsight, when I look back, is that these things shaped me. They shaped me not only understanding how strong we are as humans, but also it shaped me by realizing that these things are meant to exist in our life. They're meant to exist because without them, you won't get the lessons. Without them, you're not taught the wisdom on how to bounce back and build that resilience. Resilience isn't built through good times. Resilience is built through navigating the tough times that we all face in life.
Sure, but I have to say, as someone that has gone through a lot in her life to get to where I am today, and I look around and I see, well, it's quite comfortable, it's nice. I worked for all of this that I have today, and a lot of people like me probably you know aim to maintain that sense of being comfortable, because probably just like me, they've put a lot into it, and so now that it's comfortable, now it's time to actually enjoy it, right? And though I feel it's counterintuitive, because actually it's not the comfort that brought you to where you are today, it's the tribulations, it's the resilience you've built over doing things that are not within your comfort zone. And yet, when we reach that comfort, we want to really grab onto it, we want to hold it. And then the question always comes, oh, I have no purpose, I have no vision for my life. And I would love to hear from you how that is connected to what you just talked about before, about having that moment of crisis, but building it up towards finding what your purpose is, finding what your life vision is beyond the daily tasks and things that we just do without really thinking about what we're doing.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of things to unpack in what you shared there, Oana. The first is this idea of comfort. And the reason why comfort is the enemy of progress is because what happens is we set goals. Beginning of every new year, we might set a series of goals that we want to achieve. The issue with just goal setting is once you hit that goal, what happens next? Now, in many cases, complacency creeps in. So let's say your goal is to complete a marathon in the city that you live in. Now, in preparation for the marathon, you might change your diet, you might change how often you exercise, your training regime, who you work out with, in the build up to making sure that you can complete the marathon. But if you look at the people that aren't normally runners and they take on this challenge of completing the marathon, when they complete it, what tends to happen is they revert back to the habits and the routines they had before they started training for the marathon. And so this idea of comfort exists because once we hit certain targets and goals, we get complacent and enjoy the rewards, but forget what got us there. The same thing occurs when we look at the martial arts world. You know, what occurs is that you work hard to get from the white belt to the black belt. But when you get to the black belt, studies show that the intensity of your training actually declines, because now you can tell your colleagues, your friends, and your family that you're a black belt, but that desire to want to train as hard starts to fall because you now have achieved the end goal of getting the black belt. So really what's important is a combination of habits, but also a vision that is not as achievable in the short to medium term, a vision that really demands you to show up as somebody different along that journey. And that's why the process of evolution is so important. If you hit a goal and you hit this comfort zone, the longer you stay in that comfort zone, the harder it becomes to adapt. The world is always changing. And so the ability to adapt is a super skill. You know, if we look at this year alone, we've seen the rise of artificial intelligence and metaverse applications. Now, if you are stuck in your comfort zone, you're not going to be open enough to experiment with these new technologies or to adapt and position your business in a new way for a new way of working. And so this ability to adapt stems from the focus on putting a strong platform of habits and systems in place that allow you to win again and again and again. And this is where vision links to identity. You know, if you see yourself as an athlete, you're not only going to compete in one marathon, but exercise is going to be part of your everyday routine. If you see yourself as a writer, writing as an activity will be something you focus on a daily basis. If you see yourself as a leader, then you're going to focus on developing and refining your leadership characteristics. So I think when we talk about comfort, we have to understand, yes, comfort can serve a purpose, but ultimately, if you're in comfort too long, you're going to kill not only your progress, but your ability to adapt in a rapidly changing world.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that you said out of this that I felt it was so crucial was the difference between reaching goals and having a vision. And I think, our society doesn't really teach us to have a vision. It teaches us mainly to reach goals, right? So I was born in Eastern Europe. The society there, the culture there is all about, you know, get the best grades, go to that grade school, get that car, build that house, get married, do well, appear to be at a certain standard, and those are goals. That's not a vision. And I think in my own experience, it was very late in life, very close to my 40s, that I realized that actually, once you reach all your goals, what is then left? Then, unfortunately, comes a moment of feeling empty and stuck. Although you've worked all your life for those goals and you've reached them, and then what is the big question? So, how do we turn our goals into vision, and when can we do that?
Sure. So first of all, the difference between your standard goal and a vision is that a goal is measurable. It's defined, it's hard. You know, a goal could be to finish a marathon. A goal could be to raise uh, a certain number when it comes to funds for your business or to get you to the next level of growth in your company. But with a vision, it's not as definable in those terms. A vision is measured more by emotion and its ability to bring people into your story. And so when you think about your vision, a great exercise I do with clients to get them to really connect themselves to what that could be is to imagine themselves at 75 years old. And to imagine that they've just had a featured article in print of their favorite magazine. And in this article, the editor is talking about their life journey, what he or she has been on, what they've achieved, what they've accomplished, and the impact they've had in the world. And once they have clarity on what is in that article, it is to imagine themselves as that person, as that 75-year-old person, coming back to them today in the present and looking at the gap between where they are now and the vision of what they want to create in their lifetime, the legacy they want to leave, and notice who they have to become in order to close the gap between who they are today and who that person is at 75 years old. And the thing here is to notice that I focused on who they have to become. Because so many of us, when we think about goals is a doing thing. I want to do this, I want to do that. But here's the thing, if you achieve certain goals, does that mean you are the person you want to be? Not necessarily. But if you focus on who you want to become first, then what happens is you can do and then you can have the things you want. So becoming is really about coming from a place of identity. Who is the person you want to become? And then the habits and the choices and the behaviors come naturally from there. And it goes back to something I first picked up in Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he said to begin with the end in mind. And the end in mind is this vision. It's this vision of what you want to create in your life. But it's a vision so big, so compelling, that it pulls you forward. You don't have to push yourself forward, but there's a charge that pulls you forward. So when you wake up in the morning, you can't help but want to get up to the smell of possibilities of making things happen. And when we realize that this vision is a long-term thing, what we come to understand is that we are always a work in progress. We're always a work in progress. And if you're focused on being better than who you were yesterday, you are in constant learning mode. You are accessing this eternal student mindset, this white belt mentality of always being a beginner. Because then you become a sponge of knowledge. You absorb and take in all the different perspectives around you, and that allows you to adapt to whatever the world throws your way.
You know, what is funny is, as I listen to you talking about this on an individual level, is that I draw so many parallels with what happens in the business world for brands and companies, because oftentimes we focus on the KPIs, which are measurable, and we talk about SMART goals all the time, because then you can see and you can track how you're doing, right? As an individual, as a leader, as a team within the big company. And sometimes we forget that those KPIs need to be linked to a vision, because if you only track KPIs, which is a smart thing to do for sure, you need to still do that, but you're lacking the vision. That's where the big issue and the lack comes in, with lack of motivation, people feeling burned out, not feeling engaged with what you're doing. And I feel like that's such a strong parallel. It's almost like people and companies work sort of in the same way.
Definitely. I mean, goals can build happiness in the short term, but for me, vision builds community in the long term. And if you want a brand or a company or an individual to succeed, it's all about community, because you never get to the top alone. And that's something I've learned through how people talk about what they do. You know, when people talk about it in terms of goals, then it's a lot harder to relate emotionally than when people talk about it in terms of vision. They might say, I'm with this company because I believe that what they stand for is also what I stand for. And that the mission of what they want to create in the world is something that excites me. It's something that energizes me. And I want to be part of this evolution. I want to be part of this new world. Now, nothing in there was definable by goals in the traditional sense. But it's something that when people talk about it, it starts to bring people together under this umbrella of a unified belief that this vision also binds us and connects us. But a goal can be different for each of us. The goals you set for a C-suite executive might be different to the goals that you set for a junior employee. But this is where goals have to connect to the vision. Are the goals contributing to the vision? And is the vision dictating what goals are being set? And this is where macro and micro comes into unison. If you only focus on the macro and have no context about the micro becomes meaningless. If you have a really exciting macro vision, but there's nothing at a micro level to make it a reality, then you just have a dream. And that is why often when I work with individuals or I speak at companies and big audiences, I say that if you want to increase the odds of your success, you want to think in decades, plan in months, and execute daily. Because each of these things helps each other.
I love that you brought that up because, again, I feel like it links with what we said earlier about how society teaches you to work on objectives and not on vision. And you brought the topic about how you introduce yourself to the world. And the typical thing is you introduce yourself with the title. Because the title is the shiny object that you have that you can, place somewhere on your CV, on your LinkedIn profile, wherever, so that people know that you are that person at that company. And then the question that I asked myself, I think about 2 years ago, is what does that say really about me and who I am? As in me, Oana, not me, the head of marketing, not me working for this company or the other. And I've worked for very big companies in the past. And I realized that all these titles and companies, because I love them, because they were amazing, huge, huge brands that I was, so excited about working for, slowly became pieces of my identity until one day I realized, wait, I'm not really sure who Oana actually is. So let me work on her for a second and let me try to figure out, bring back the core of what this person really is about. I completely forgot what it was. I didn't know. And so I started this path of, doing things, and as you, reading things, meeting people, talking about things, doing this podcast in that quest. So the question that I wanted to ask you is, what is the best way to introduce ourselves to the world?
Best way to introduce yourself to the world is through story. We, since the dawn of civilization, have always connected through story. Story connects us. From the days of sitting around a campfire and sharing stories about our lives that teach lessons to other people, to how brands today market their products and services through story. And when you tell someone what you do through story, what you are doing is you are doing the equivalent of what a film does when you go to the cinema. So when you go to the cinema, before the main feature film starts to play, you have a series of trailers. And the trailer might only be a minute to a minute and a half long. But if the trailer has done its job, you might turn to your partner or your children or a friend and you say to them, when that film comes out in the cinema, let's go and watch it. Because the trailer has given you an insight into what will be in the full film. Now, if we look at it at how we introduce ourselves, if we introduce ourselves such that we have delivered the equivalent of a trailer, then the next question on the person that's hearing your introduction would say, tell me more. They want to watch the full film, but in this case, the full film is your product and your service. They now want to know more about who you are and what you do. And that's why story is so powerful, because story is really about vision. It's about what you stand for, what you believe in, and what you're working towards. And it's also an open invitation to say, hey, this is what I'm working on. Do you want to be a part of it? Do you want to learn more? Is there ways we can collaborate? And the story says all of that a title doesn't. And also, if you were to introduce yourself with a title, it actually puts you at a disadvantage. So the challenge for those listening is, next time somebody asks you, what do not introduce yourself with a title, because the human brain tends to make a judgment on you as a person based on your title. So if somebody said to you after you asked them, what do you do? I'm an accountant. What do you think goes through your mind? Apologies to any accountants listening, but as you can imagine, when somebody hears those words, even if you are the most fun accountant out there, they don't hear the word fun come in their head. They have certain judgments about that title. So in order to bypass human judgment, that again, it's not our fault, it's the way the human brain works. What we do is we lead with story, because story contains emotion, and emotion is nothing more than energy in action. So to give an example from a business side, a business may be in the industry of manufacturing paper. Not the most exciting industry, but if they focused on just telling you what they did, they may say something like, we produce beautiful paper for the public at cheaper prices than our competitors. Now, you get what they do, but it doesn't quite excite you. It doesn't get you jumping out of your bed and wanting to do business with them or to buy their products. But imagine if they instead focus on what they did, but focus on the vision, and they focus on story. They might say something different like this. We believe that the more we can spread messages of hope, of positivity, of kindness, the better our planet can become. And one of those mediums that we can do that is through the form of the written word. And this is where we come in. We design beautiful, handcrafted paper for big ideas. Do you want to join us and to see how we can impact the world by spreading more messages into communities across our planet? Now, same company, same product, different delivery. The second one is done in a way that connects with you emotionally, carries a lot more energy, but the first one doesn't really connect with you because it's a lot more abstract.
I'm totally in. I'm totally in on the second option. So I'm in. I want to buy this product for sure. And I mean, listen, I introduced myself with my title for the longest time, and I felt very proud of it. I have a different version now, but I have to be honest, it's not easy for me to say it out loud, because the other side that is listening to you might perceive it as a very pompous, arrogant way of presenting yourself. So the question is also, how do we change the mindset on the opposite side so that on the receiving end, there is a bigger understanding around this idea of identity, of brand, of self-brand, not in the typical dirty way of thinking about marketing and you're selling yourself, but more of, I know who I am, and this is what I believe in. These are my values. I'm sharing them with you.
Yeah, I think if you haven't introduced yourself in that way before, of course, it is going to feel a little strange and awkward at the beginning. And the key with doing anything new for the first time is practice. Practice, practice, practice. And as you practice with different audiences, then you get a feel for yourself of which part of what you present works well and which things you feel don't really work so well. And I think it's also to have some fun with it. So, if I get asked about what is coaching, what do you do in terms of your work as a coach, the response I give might be different depending on the audience I'm talking to. So I remember one time I was doing a fireside chat to a room of people who were in the media industry and, who've worked in TV and film. And they said to me, what do you do in your work? And I knew that because of their background, they might not know some of the stories that I may share based on what I do. So I said to the audience, raise your hand if you have watched Christopher Nolan's film, Inception. And around 80, 90% of the hands went up, so most of the audience had watched that film. And I said to the audience, this is what I do. Essentially, I do Inception on the people I work with. What I do is I take them layer beneath a layer, beneath a layer, beneath a layer, all the way to who they are at their core. And that's where our work begins. It's to understand who you are beneath all of those layers. to begin to work with you at that level to help you see different perspectives of what is possible. And then we come out back into reality. Reality hasn't changed, but your perception and interpretation of it has. And that is where transformation begins. Because what happens is when I begin to awaken a seed of possibility, that is when people's world changes. You want to hear about a client I worked with recently?
Yes, I would love to. You got me hooked already with the story. I'm still thinking about Inception.
So this is what I mean, is that once you are more comfortable delivering a better introduction, what happens is you can start to have fun. Depending on the audience, depending on the person you're talking to, you can start to tailor that introduction so it makes sense quicker to the person that you were speaking to.
Absolutely. Understanding that the person on the other side might not have the same level of awareness and understanding as you, and crafting that answer differently. One of the things that I love about what you say in the book and in some of your speaking that I've listened to and other podcasts is that in order to sell yourself to others, first you need to sell yourself to yourself. And honestly, I feel that this is probably the most difficult exercise because the self belief has to be there. The vision and the seed of opportunity, as you mentioned, has to be there. And as you say, having the right people in your corner to believe in you and to cheer for you is also so important. How do you look about this transformation as well as to see yourself as maybe others can also see you from the outside and not be so critical on yourself all the time?
Yeah, I mean, that concept that to sell to others, it begins with selling you to you. And I think people don't really understand that. A lot of the times where you are in a position of selling a product or service to other people, you might do that for your company, you might do that for yourself. We exclusively focus just on how do I sell better? What is a new technique or tool or strategy that I can use to sell this product or service better to a customer? But we forget that's only one type of sale. There's always two sales that occur. And that second is selling you to you. And not many of us have really worked on that selling you to you. And that begins with self-belief. It begins with your opinion of yourself and the value that you can bring to every conversation that you have. Because if you truly believe in what you have to offer, in the product and service that you're selling, guess what? People will feel that energy. People will feel that. That's why they're drawn to you. That's why we have these words such as magnetism or charisma. Because what happens is that when you truly believe in what you have to offer to the world, you naturally have good charisma and magnetism. You just draw opportunities and you just draw people into your circle. And that comes from selling you to you. And the way we do that is by starting to give ourselves evidence that we are who we say we are. So if you just say, hey, I really believe in myself, I can do all of these things, that can only hold so long without evidence. So as you start to do small steps towards making things a reality, what happens is the wins that you have, however small, that feeds in to your self-belief as evidence. Hey, I've shown myself I can do this. I've got the skills. I've got the foundation. I've got the experience. And that helps to build your confidence. But the fact is, you don't need confidence to start. What you need is courage. The courage to try, the courage to experiment, the courage to put yourself out there, not knowing what the response will be like. But as you start to overcome those self-doubts, as you start to expand your comfort zone, that's how you build your confidence. The confidence comes from knowing that you can do something you weren't quite sure you could do before. And as you build that confidence, that self-belief builds, and that is what comes across to people. It's like what Maya Angelou said, where she said that people may forget what you said, they may forget what you did, but they will never forget the way you made them feel. And that way that you made them feel is a transference of energy. It's why when you speak to an audience, a lot of trainers would say that the majority of your communication is not from your voice, but it's from your body language. It's all of the non-verbals that we send to the audience. a lot of that communication is through our non-verbal communication.
It takes me back to 2 years ago when I started this whole idea with podcasting and writing online and all that a bit more in public. And it was really because I wanted to give myself the evidence that you were talking before earlier about. I knew that I worked hard my whole career. I knew that I had reached the goals that I had set to myself. I knew that I was in the position that I wanted to be in the first place for an amazing company that I loved. And still, the question was, what makes me different? What makes me unmatched? That's where the word came from, versus the million other marketers out there. And I will be honest with you, as much as my track record showed that I probably had those skills, I didn't feel them tangible enough to say with clarity and conviction and self-belief, yes, this is what I'm all about, this is what makes me different than my colleagues or other people in the industry or the million other marketers out there from all the different industries. And so it put me on this path of doing small things every day and testing myself and my limits and working on my copywriting and working on building an audience and working on the actual skills, becoming a practitioner of my craft in marketing. And then 2 years later, you know what I realized? I realized that actually, thank God I started, because there were a lot of gaps in the knowledge because I wasn't actually doing the thing that I was talking about. And the amount of learning that you get by simply doing the things that you talk about, practicing them, you mentioned before as well. Don't just sell something, build a story behind it, go deeper with it. If you don't do that, it is merely a task that you perform, and then you don't understand the everything that goes behind it. So coming back to your point, I think that in my case, 2 years later, I feel that I'm a better marketer today, and I can actually take this learning back into my job every day for just opening myself up to the possibility of testing and getting the tangible of what I can do.
And I think what you have shared there, Oana, is evidence to the fact that if you have a strong bias to action, you're going to make far more progress than most people, because imperfect action that is executed is always better than perfect action never taken, because you're going to learn quicker from the feedback that you get, and you're going to become a better marketer or business leader or technician or engineer or analyst simply by taking those steps of action. Because the value of any idea is only ever realized when action is taken. If no action is taken, it's just up in your head. It's a scenario that may or may not happen.
And the other thing that I realized 2 years later is that all of the answers that I needed were inside of me. But I wasn't able to tap into them at that time. So I guess the question to you as well is, I guess this happens to everyone. You really have the questions, but maybe you don't spend enough time to ask yourself the right questions, or you don't give yourself permission to test yourself or to test new things that maybe are out of your comfort zone. So how do we tap into those things that we already know?
Well, first of all, Warner, you're absolutely right. We all have the answers inside of us. I think what we lack is making the time in our busy schedules to go inside and to know ourselves and to hear those answers and what we're going to do about them. Because we're so used to thinking that unless we are busy doing something, we're not productive. And we tend to feel guilty that if I'm not doing something, I'm resting or I'm slowing down, I'm disconnecting, then we start to feel guilt from not doing something. But actually, if you look at some of the greatest breakthroughs in history, if you look back in your own lives, what you observe is that some of the biggest insights you've had, some of the best breakthroughs you've had in your own life have come when you were on holiday, when you had that long bath, when you had that nice shower, when you were out running, or in the gym doing a workout, when you were swimming outside. These ideas often come and manifest, not when you're standing in front of your screens or books or in an office, but when you're disconnected. Because there's moments of disconnection that's where the dots can connect.
So, Simon, I want to read one page of your book that I particularly enjoyed reading, which says protect, the things you need to protect. So I'll just read this quickly for our audience. Design your life by designing your days. Stop prioritizing other people's needs over your own. Progress faster by saying no to the activities that are holding you back. Slow down in order to speed up. Remind yourself that the present is all you have and is where your future is manufactured. Take time to connect with nature. Surround yourself with people who challenge you to level up. Create an environment around you that makes it impossible not to succeed. And remind yourself that you never get to the top alone. Cancel your subscription to clutter. Start acting like the CEO of your life. Master the flow of money, and it will be a source of energy. I just love this picture. I feel this page. I feel like I will print it somewhere and have it next to my bed somewhere so I can see it every single day. What led you to put this in the book?
At the end of each part of the book, I wanted to think of a way of how I could summarize the key messages from each part of the book. So there's 4 parts of the book. And I came with this idea of putting together a summary via a word graphic like the one you've just shared. Firstly, because it would be easy for people to photograph or take an image of if they wanted to share it. And second, because it was very concise. It was a nice, concise way to get the key takeaways from each part of the book together in just one page.
I love it. And to finish off the amazing conversation that we had today, which I cannot thank you enough for your time and being so kind to share so much with us. What does success mean to you today, Simon?
Good question, Oana. Success as a definition for me has evolved from the time I graduated from university to starting my own business to becoming a parent for the first time. But at this moment of time, success to me is all about impact. It's about the impacts that I have in people's lives through every conversation I get involved with, through every interaction I have, whether that is through speaking at an event they invite me to speak at, through the clients I work with, even at a personal level, the impact I have on my children, how they become as they grow into adults. It's all about impact because I realize that our value as humans is determined by how much more we have given to the world than we have taken from it. So me now, success is defined by my service and the impact that I can create as a result of the service I deliver in the world.
Simon, I share that vision with you, and I'm so happy that my own vision of success has changed over time. So, and I also want to say I appreciate, what you have put in this book. It had a big impact on me, and everything that I listen to you say when you speak on the podcast that you go to definitely has an impact on people. So, thank you so much for doing that, for that service, and thank you for being on Unmatched today.
Thank you so much for having me, and so glad to hear that you've enjoyed it.